Hey everyone! Before we get into this episode, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something about the language being used. Throughout this conversation, you'll hear a lot of binary gendered terms like girls and women and men when referring to photographers and models. While my co hosts and I speak from our own experiences as cisgender female models, I want to recognize that not everyone in this industry identifies that way. Non binary and male models absolutely exist and are an important part of this space. Additionally, while not all photographers who hire models for nude shoots fit into the category that is being portrayed in this episode, many tend to be heterosexual men hiring femme presenting models. That dynamic naturally influences some of the topics we discuss, but the insights in this episode may apply to a wide range of creative collaborations. For the sake of continuity and ease of conversation, the language in this episode may lean toward the binary, but modeling is for everyone. We appreciate you listening with that in mind. Now, let's jump in. Okay. I've got another disclaimer, and thank you for taking the time to listen to all my disclaimers, but I got a lot of great feedback from the part 1 of this episode. And if you haven't listened to that yet, go back and listen to that one before you listen to this one, because this one is extension of part 1. This is part 2. But I have gotten some messages and some feedback, and one photographer said, remember that not all photographers fit into just one box. And I wanted to address that. Yes, I'm not just sitting here trying to fit photographers in a box. I want to remind you that the topic of talking about different types of photographers that us nude models work with was a multiple photographer requested topic. And so I am appeasing that request by going down the rabbit hole on these various styles and personalities and creative intentions of the people that work with us. So while you're listening, if you're a photographer and you feel like, oh, I have some aspects of this photographer that they're talking about or that one, we're not trying to put people in a box. We're just talking about just the different flavors. You might be a mix of some of these flavors, or you might be your own special flavor. But whoever you are, we love working with you as long as you are respectful and want to take nice pictures with us. And I will say that 98% of all the people that I work with are super cool, super chill, creative, want to collaborate, have ideas, are just interesting, good, positive people to work with. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there. All right, here's more of the episode. I got a message from a photographer who I've worked with a handful of times, who I love working with. He listened to part 1 and gave me some feedback. And he said, I would love for you to give me your evaluation of what kind of photographer am I. Give me these Myers-Briggs definition of what kind of photographer I am in your eyes. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was really interesting thinking about it as targeting on one specific person rather than generalizing similar traits of all the photographers that we've worked with and coming up with nicknames for those who share similar traits. So I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I love working with this photographer in particular, and we don't work with each other super frequently. Obviously we live in different parts of the country, but when I do work with him, I always feel very supported in what I do, and I feel very special. And so I was like, what is a good word or category descriptor to come up with this particular photographer and the photographers who have these similar traits? And I thought that this was a good one that also applies to a lot of other photographers who hire traveling nude models. And I would like to name this type the pedestal photographer. Pedestal photographer is somebody who uplifts the model. They look forward to working with the model. because they have a love for, first of all, their own creativity, and second of all, for that model in particular. Like perhaps they follow them online, or maybe they don't, but at first, but after they've created a connection with them, they want to continue working with them and supporting the model in a way. But this support isn't necessarily a support that's holding up a whole structure, like a business type support. That type of a support would probably be something I would consider like a support beam, or like a column that's holding up some kind of like a corporate structure or entrepreneurial, thing. But these pedestal photographers are lifting up the models that they work with. They're hiring the model, they are sharing images with the model, they are, being supportive perhaps in like their conversations together, or like, coming up with photo ideas that the model really likes that they also want to do. So there's like this uplifting, and a lot of photographers have this element to them. And I would like to say that if you're listening to this and you work with a lot of models, like you might have a little bit of a pedestal photographer in you. But the differentiation that I came up with between the pedestal photographer versus the support beam or column is more that like the motivation for shooting is like looking forward to uplifting the model rather than uplifting some kind of like an overall like business entrepreneurial thing that you are doing for like some kind of a commercial campaign or whatever. Like it's more about the model. Yeah, so props to all the pedestal photographers out there. We have a symbiotic relationship with each other. We all want to seek you out. You all want to seek us out. And it's magic when we get together. All right. Okay, welcome back. We had an interruption and we had to continue recording the rest of the episode on a second day. I had to catch a plane, and like I feel like we really wouldn't be doing this episode full justice if we were rushing along. So what we've already talked about is we've introduced that we're going to be speaking about different types of photographers that work with models. We talked about the social media type photographers who are really like focusing their photography on social media, like, gaining followers, gaining popularity, getting that validation, like having an avenue to share their work. We talked about the outdoor and location-based photographers that like to shoot in nature only or at abandoned buildings, and like the fun and the danger that comes along with that. We talked about various levels of gearhead, overprepared, underprepared photographers who come up with a bunch of cool ideas in the studio. If you got ideas, that's something to look forward to for the model. So, like, we talked about that. And then we were just getting into photographers of ulterior motives. We talked about the my wife doesn't know photographer, the private client photographer, and the magazine publisher photographer. So, Nadia, how do you feel that we've been coming along with this conversation before getting into more archetypes?
Kind of listening to you mention the topics that we covered is nice to hear. Be like, wow, like we really did cover a lot of ground yesterday. I'm happy to be talking to you on this topic. I think you're right. I can offer a bit of a more unique perspective from like a sex worker angle onto some of these archetypes, and that, I've met a lot of these types of people when I was doing glamour modeling and art modeling myself. But now I've kind of, deviated my career a little bit into more, intimate work. And it's just giving me a whole lot of perspective about what I was doing in the past and being able to understand it better and the types of people I was working with. So it's like really refreshing for me to like talk about this through like a very like insightful and slightly reflective, perspective. So thanks for like just giving me this platform to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just thinking that for an episode of this topic, there's definitely like hierarchical spectrum that people perceive themselves to live on or perceive others that they live on, where there's like what people consider to be trashy, and then there's what people consider to be classy, and supposedly everybody thinks that they want to be aiming towards what's like perceived as classy, right? And in the model photography realm, that's fine art nude photography. And, there's even some people that go as far as to say, like, don't make eye contact with the camera or it's not art. There's like the art snobs that look down on anything glamour or erotic. And then there's general snobs that look down on like, strippers or OnlyFans models or like full service escorts and people who are in more of the sex work range. But with you coming from your perspective, being on that side of the spectrum that is more stigmatized, I feel like we're more fully able to like dive into these topics with like, we're just blowing all the stigmas out of the way.
Thanks. I remember I had like a really impactful experience. I was on Facebook and there's a model group over there where, models talk to each other and offer support and, community building. And I don't remember what the topic originally was posted about, but some girl was complaining about an interaction she had with a photographer. And what she was saying was like valid, but she didn't understand that the person that hired her was misunderstanding what she provided. And she was like very negative and very hostile. And it kind of came from this air of like, "Oh, how dare he even assume that I would do these things?" And somebody made a comment and she's like, "Bitch, you get naked in front of the camera. You're a sex worker. It is a scope. It is a very, very different like breadth of work. But fundamentally, like you use your body and it's nude. And nudity is going to make people think sexual thoughts. You just can't escape it, even though you might not see it that way yourself."
Yeah.
And I just read that and I was like, whoa, am I a sex worker? And I just like lay in bed and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not like a whore. Ooh, prostitute. Let me tell you, the most disgusting word in the whole fucking world is the Russian way to say the word prostitute. Prostitutka. Makes my fucking skin crawl. It is just like, it's ugly and it's gross and it's nasty. And I don't know, personal child trauma. I'm like obsessed with like complex things. And I like to understand things that are difficult and stigmatized and like complex and non-traditional. And that's been like my motivator to follow this like path of this industry and be like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. But I've been able to always do it on my terms. I haven't done it because of scarcity. Like I have a college education in marketing. Like I have applied my like business sense to my career and, you know, navigated it that way. And I've like watched all these people I've worked with. I've learned from them. I've learned my social skills from these like highly successful men and all these categories that we're talking about, right? These like, all these like kind of tropes. I've met these people and I've learned from them and I've learned how to like not look dumb and also how to like control a room and protect myself and like steer conversation because fundamentally like the people that work with models, like, yes, some people are really saving their funds to be able to afford us, but we're a luxury commodity. And so the people that can usually work with us are people that are in some capacity successful, which means there's probably something to learn from them.
Yeah.
And I was always like, approach this career that way, like, sure, the modeling and the picture and like the process of talking about photos is like a thing to do. But the point of what I'm doing is to like understand the people that I'm interacting with and like why they're looking for models and,
Yeah.
like farther and farther. So yeah, like, thank you. Thank you for giving me like a space to talk about this stuff. And honestly, I completely understand why a lot of girls don't want to have this conversation because
Yeah.
it is a little gross. Like I've started talking about something about my life and I started off on like a topic that's dignified, right? Oh, I have a rental property or, oh, I do house flipping or just whatever the hell, right? I'm media marketing. People usually like suspect, hot girl media, something digital, but and then like, oh, by the way, I'm a sex. And I just see their like eyes open up. Usually they like swallow their like spit a little bit, sweat, blink once, twice, like freeze up. It's just fascinating to see people's like faces just like contort
Yeah.
when I just look at them and I'm like, sex worker. I don't know. I can fucking kick out of it for something. But it's empowering to me because I know like who I am and why I do it and like the ethics of how I offer myself and also the legality. Like I'll do whatever in certain counties in Nevada when I'm in the appropriate facility. I'm not going to do it anywhere else. I have way too much to risk in my life to, get into legal trouble. Like I'm squeaky clean girl. Like no thanks. But, you know, I've done this like out of curiosity and fascination and like truly a passion to like understand it so I can talk about it better.
Yeah.
And kind of looking at all these like types, like I've spent many nights just like thinking about like the people I've met and their personalities. And sometimes maybe they don't really see themselves the way I might. And so kind of having you guide me through this conversation has been really great. So, nope.
In the same vein, talking about like the stigma of like model photography, nudity, sex work, like a lot of these photographers that like work with nude models, like even if they're like the nicest photographers ever, love working with them, they come up with cool ideas. So many of these photographers are scared to death that somebody is going to say that they were creepy. And oftentimes it's the photographers that are definitely not creepy at all. Like, first of all, if you're worried at all about coming off as creepy, you are not the people that we're talking about when we're talking about creepy people. Because people that are creepy, they don't give a shit, right?
I mean, this problem has like so many angles, right? So let's like separate it first with like nefarious, creepy, or not nefarious, right? Like, are you oblivious and that's why you're creepy? Or you're strategic and you're just really bad at it and that's why you're creepy? Like the people that are like, oh, you're just a dumb girl. You don't suspect anything. Let me adjust your bra strap. And I'm going to hold my finger just a little extra long with your skin top contact as I run it down your back.
Oh my God.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Absolutely. I've been in strip clubs where I'm dancing and someone's like slow feeding me $5. And for the last dollar, they pulled out my little G string and they put a whole fucking whopping dollar in there. And then they glide their finger along like my panty line and like flick like my clit area. And it's like this like kind of like dominance of like, "Ah, got you." And I have these experiences because like I want to experience them to understand what women have to go through from these like nefarious people. So I can analyze it, think about it, talk about it, and like not have to go back and do it again. But like it sticks with me, and I've experienced that. And through like the modeling world, I've had plenty of times when photographers were like, oh, put on this dress in front of me.
Take it. They're in the dressing room hovering over you when you're like putting on your outfit, like breathing down your neck or something.
Yeah, yeah. And then you can just run with it with like 10,000 horror stories, right? And now I'm like, okay, so like, are you like a predator? Because now, like, I need to make sure I'm out of here because I am not protected right now by the law in most of these situations, right? I do not look that cute. I'm a pretty girl with a suitcase full of lingerie in a hotel room. Mm,
Right.
you know? But at the same time, I'm like, or are you just like really, really, really desperate and you just don't know like where to go? And like, I guess I've just been kind of fascinated by that track of like, well, what if these people just like have absolutely no context of social skills and don't understand how to like approach women and ask for what they need. And they're just like being dang just for a tiny touch of skin, you know? And that's like kind of fascinated me with like the sex worker industry and its necessity to like protect women from these like starved men and giving them like an outlet for consensual interaction because of these creepos that I experienced in the glamour modeling. Like I've had photographers, I was warned about this dude. So I like took the gig because I was curious. somebody told me, like, oh yeah, there's this guy, he has a bad habit of saying he's a nudist, but then he starts like popping a boner when he's shooting with you. He's not going to text you, but he just like wants you to see his boner. And I'm like, this will be fun. Let's try it out. And of course, he's texting me, he's sending me innuendos. I'm not acknowledging them. I'm just like ignoring it completely. And I'm just going to like pretend I'm oblivious, but I know what's up. Shoot starts, whatever. Somehow he ends up naked. Somehow he's got a boner. And I'm just like, what in the hell? Like, why can't this dude just like find somebody consenting to do this with? Why is he like doing this with these models? And I'm like, maybe he just doesn't know like where to go with it,
Or maybe,
And I just did what he,
maybe it's the lack of consent that turns him on.
oh, definitely. And that goes into like the nefarious types, right?
Yeah.
And so, I had this experience. I didn't feel violated. I fucked with him. As soon as I would see his boner go up, I would talk about something really, really not sexy. I'd be like, oh my God, like I just farted. Oh my God, my boyfriend and I would just watch his dick go limp. And I just like kept his blood pressure just up and down the whole shoot. I was like, fuck you. Oh my God. And so like nothing ever happened to me. But people like him, like they're dangerous because someone else is not gonna have an experience like mine. I shouldn't have had that experience. What she did was wrong. But I indulged it out of yeah, to just be like, I'm gonna keep you at bay. Like I'm not saying no and then you're doing something. I'm just trying to be like, sure, but like over there, Yeah. And so yeah, like there's plenty of creepy photographers, right? So this is like the bad intent or people who are unaware and they maybe struggle with social skills as a whole, even in more normal relationships than being surrounded by beautiful naked women, the most normal thing ever, right? Upside down, beautiful naked women on rocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think a lot of men have experience in not, in knowing how to carry themselves in those situations when they get excited, right?
Yeah.
And it's a failing of a lot of education and a lot of courtesy and standards. And it makes me sad.
The nudist photographer is definitely like not common, but niche, like archetype of photographer because there's probably at least one in every major city, I'm sure. Do you mind if I'm naked also? And I'm like, well, I mean, like, it kind of like puts you in this juxtaposition where you're like, well, I'm not technically a nudist. I'm a nude model. That means I'm comfortable nude, but I'm not an exhibitionist, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And right, like I love to be nude, but I want to be nude around people to whom my nudity doesn't matter. If my nudity is not acknowledged, then I feel safe being nude. But if my nudity is acknowledged, which draws attention to my like sexuality, now I'm working. So I'm not going to be like nude in a space where people are going to expect some type of a specific response from me. Like, no, like that's not my personality. Like I'm resting. I'm not, looking for that. There's plenty of attention seeking people or just problems and miscommunications that happen when perfectly well intended situations get misunderstood. And, it's so easy to completely destroy someone's credibility from, making a claim against them that something happened. Right.
Right.
And I understand both ways. It's kind of like, two cowboys standing at each other, with like, tumbleweeds in the background of like, well, who's gonna screw each other more first? Like the pretty girl gets attacked. The government isn't going to be there to protect her. She's going to be assumed to be, an illegal sex worker and she's going to have criminal consequence. Well, in return, a woman can extort plenty from a man she's working with, especially if he has a family, a career. It's not that hard to figure out who you are. Like, it's the modern world. Like, privacy is not particularly private anymore.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Like, I understand why both sides really struggle, like coming to, an agreement about
Yeah.
creepiness and consequences. So
Yeah.
that's a really short answer. I'm so sorry.
A photographer DM'd me recently, and this photographer's the nicest guy. I know that all the models that work with him love working with him. he's not well off. He has to save up to, like, afford shoots, but he hires experienced models. Never heard anything negative at all. Everybody that, like, communicates with him on social media, I always see these positive interactions, always leaving nice comments. He messaged me, like, last week, and he was like, "Hey, can I ask you a question? And you don't have to answer it if you don't want, but has anybody ever said anything that about me being creepy on the podcast?" And I was like, "No, like, definitely not. Like, I've never heard anything negative about you." But people are really, really worried about it, even if they're not. Like, if they've never, like, had any interactions that, like, where they did something nefarious or whatever. I think that people that's worried about their people how people perceive them just for the fact that they are shooting nudes, like, regardless of how artistic they are.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you're saying that from the standpoint of a photographer. I experienced that as a model. Like I remember I made a distinct choice. I was like, I can either go into like nursing school and like just kill my career and all these like, you know, stage names I've come up with, and just that's it, like do something else. Or am I going to commit to this, identity in this career and like forever have some amount of stigma chase me? And, you know, I've accepted it, but I'm also doing it more as like an intentional career, right?
Mhm.
But for a photographer, like just because one time you decided to take some photos that someone else at one point might judge to be
Yeah.
controversial, now you can have your whole image ruined. Like, I would like to think that the world's becoming a little more open minded and flexible, but not
Yeah.
everywhere, always, all the time.
Another interjection, I would like to say that in between the first release of part 1 and releasing this episode part 2, I have come up with some other ideas that we didn't talk about together with me and Vika. And one of them is it's kind of like an offshoot, and you may or may not identify with this, but a lot of the photographers that we've been talking about are photographers that frequently work with traveling nude models, and we're all often like kind of know about each other or have heard of each other or sort of in this community. But there's also a category of photographers that I wouldn't say necessarily have, like, personality traits that link them, but there's an element of, like, being off the beaten path, or photographers who are in the woodwork, so to speak, who don't necessarily have their eye out on the model's travel notices, or don't necessarily subscribe to a bunch of traveling models newsletters to find out who's coming into town. And they don't necessarily tune in to social media all the time to, like, see who's available to come to their city and shoot. But they're in the woodwork. They are mostly doing their own thing in life, and maybe they came up with a creative idea and they suddenly are like, all right, I need to find a model to create this idea with. So they have a vision, and the vision involves some kind of an aesthetic or perhaps physical traits of the model that fit into the creation that they want to create. So they go online, and maybe they use Google and they try to find, where do I find models? Maybe they end up on Model Mayhem or Model Society or Craigslist even, but they just need to find a model for this vision. And a lot of these photographers end up working with somebody who is local to their area. Not always, but I would say that the photographers who are in the woodwork are definitely worth noting, and I always think it's special when one of them reaches out to me. It is always different though, because as a traveling model, we're looking for references like, oh, who have you worked with recently? Or, like, you look at their portfolio trying to find familiar faces, and if a photographer who's in the woodwork, maybe they haven't shot anybody in 5 years and they suddenly have this spark of creativity that they want to, like, suddenly create something. But for that, that means that maybe they don't have recent references of other models that they've worked with, which can make it harder to, like, background check them, but not impossible. Sometimes when I'm background checking a photographer, I'll even go as far as to, like, have a phone conversation with them, just like catch a vibe, like I feel like your spider sense or your intuition can really lead you into a good direction if you have a sense of like what kind of questions to ask and listening to how they answer like your questions about, what kind of shoot you want to have. So anyway, yeah, that's another photographer, the ones who are in the woodwork, the elusive photographers. Speaking of stigma and all this, there's another photographer archetype that falls into the ulterior motive one that I thought of in between yesterday and today that I wanted to bring up. And a lot of us models, especially models who have like, more than just artistic and Playboy nude within our like experience and comfort zone. Like if you're open to modeling with like open leg, penthouse, hustler style or whatever, which I have done a good amount of, and I know that you've done a good amount of also. There is an archetype character of photographer. And like a lot of people are gonna be like, oh my god, no way. There's not a whole range of people who are like this. There are a huge demographic of photographers within the freelance photography community that prioritize working with models who will shoot cross shots. I call them the cross shot photographer, but there are so many photographers that I've worked with that their criteria for working with me is that they would, even if most of the shoot is just like artsy Playboy, they want to at least get some close-ups of your crotch and then you like spreading it.
Yeah. So I remember having like a little schism about that. And I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, why are these people like this? I remember asking someone in some very roundabout way, specifically about this topic. And these are not my words. Like, this is not my opinion. I'm just reiterating what a photographer told me their thinking behind this. He said, they were like, okay, so if I hire a model who's willing to pose more than I want to get the bulk of content, it gives me a padding of like liability freedom to not be called creepy. Actually, funny that you literally just had this topic right before this.
Right.
So that I can then like not have to worry too much because I know her quote, quote limit is like a little beyond. Well, and if it's there anyways, well, we might as well take a picture of it. No, it's like my brain hurts, but I guess like that's a way to think about something.
Yeah.
From my personal standpoint, like I guess everyone has a thing, whatever. As long as you're paying me my fair rate and you're not touching me and like being rude. Be fascinated with my earlobes, my belly buttons, whatever you desire. But
Yeah, right. Like I said, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like, a majority of these shoots, the comfort zone and like exactly what we were gonna shoot, like involving like the close-ups and the open leg and like the very specifics of all of these are like communicated in writing in advance. So it's all consensual and all agreed to. But I'm just saying that the amount of like photographers that want to get like that specific type of like type shot. There are a lot of them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would maybe say like it's kind of, imagine the photo shoot being a sort of a buildup, right? Like, ooh, you start off dressed and you're just so cute and you're in little like lingerie and then you roll around a little bit and then you like tease out of it. And then, ooh, well, now you're just so relaxed on the bed and you look so cute and playful. And, now you're nude and blah, blah, blah. And like, you present yourself as like a flirtatious, attractive, beautiful boudoir model.
Right.
Then the shoot transitions to like, okay, well, now I'm available for something a little more erotic. Right? For us, we're still just posing. I'm like, move left leg here at this angle. The light is coming here, point toe. I'm just in like, my body is just moving because I know how I look three-dimensionally to the camera. But this person on the other end is going, oh my God, she's doing the dance floor. Oh, and then I lay back on the bed and I open my legs in an inviting way. I mean, the lens just like, just gets sucked in like it's a big black hole, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess like this is the process, right? Like naturally you would do these things and then a man would respond by getting all close and all up in there.
Yeah.
And if you're holding this big old phallic object and you're using this like photo shoot experience as a consensual way to obtain like personal porn,
Right.
I is
Consent is definitely the key in all of this. Like, we're not advocating to contact a swimwear model and try and spring this on them.
I got speculum. Can you model it for me, please?
Huh?
Oh, of course. And like, and I remember as I would like expand the tiers of what I do, like, it's like the dance would add a few extra steps. Because at first I'm just like on the bed looking cute. And then I'm like, well, I guess I'm like doing this, right? And, eventually that transitioned into like fetish and, more like erotic stuff. But like, I remember myself like growing in my like career path and I was like, okay, I guess like this is when I do this part and I look this way. And I guess now instead of looking, sexy with the lingerie and more teasing, now I'm going to lean back in this more like provocative kind of, you know, not crass, but maybe the word I'm looking for is like
Naughty.
naughty, yeah, but like aggressive, but I'm not like coming at you. I'm like provoking you to come at me. Like, look, I'm like laid back. My legs are open. I'm looking you right in the eyes. Not you. I'm looking at the lens, but whatever, right? Not you. I'm like, I fucking the lens. And then I think photographers sometimes not understand that process because they're not models. They've never been like, they don't practice this as much. Like,
Yeah.
I can make sweet, sweet love to that lens. It's nice and shiny and I can see my reflection in it. I look at your eyes. I feel nothing. I'm posing for the lens. I am a professional. I am not getting wet.
Right. Yeah. That was what I was going to get into next is that, like, if you're not like really used to the process of an erotic shoot, then you might assume that the model is like actually turned on because they're really good at delivering those facial expressions and positions and all of that eroticism and sensuality and stuff. But it's a skill.
Yeah. And let's just also remember too, like a man can't particularly fake that.
Yeah.
Like, he can't. I mean, again, I'm not a man, please. I hope, like, correct me if I'm completely off track, but like, you actually have to be aroused in some capacity to get blood flow going, to like be able to pose in an erotic, provocative way and send out the same message we can by just laying back and queefing quietly, you know? Right? Like, and I think it's a schism of just like, well, as a man, I would imagine I'm like, well, I could only do that if I really was turned on. So she must really like me.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know. I like the fact that you have snacks and you didn't negotiate my rate and we started on time.
And it's not freezing cold in here.
And it's warm and there's music and it's like a nice hotel and then we're going to be done, at an appropriate time. Like, that's my favorite part about you. Thank you for being like a cool collaborator.
Right.
I
Yeah.
promise you it's not about anything else.
Yeah. But I kind of going back to what you said about how sometimes photographers will hire a model that have wider range of a comfort zone because they don't want to like accidentally, go out of bounds in their posing suggestions or whatever. Like there are some models that like they don't want labia showing. So and that's like a personal preference and a legit boundary for sure. Like not wanting certain parts of your body to be on the internet for sure. But I suppose that like hiring somebody that had more of an open leg comfort zone limit would eliminate the worry that you're accidentally going to like potentially cross their boundaries. So I could see that being a factor. But and then also like do a disservice to all of the primarily art nude only models that, are amazing models to work with as well. Every model has their beautiful like elements about them that like deserve to be hired and photographed. But I guess it really depends on like what you're trying to shoot. And if you need the open leg shot, why? Like, what are you capturing,
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. Like, I admire the women that, like their body is like a sculpture, right? It's incredible. Like, I think that type of work is beautiful. And it does like very deeply bother me that those women who don't want to be harassed for the services that people harass them about, like they have to put up with it, you know? And I think it just comes from like lack of clarity of like, well, where are the spaces where the girls are for sure okay with it? Which means there's spaces where the girls there are for sure not.
Yeah.
And because like the internet is just like this hodgepodge of everything and everyone talks in code because, you know, getting blocked on social media, et cetera, it just makes it very unclear. And yeah, it hurts the people that don't want to have these suggestions even imposed because it's disrespectful of their brand, you know, but people just keep asking.
Right. And, I have a lot of friends that are primarily art models. And then I have a lot of friends that are like explicit models or porn stars. And I do have a handful of like, sugar baby, escort, sex worker friends. So I can see like all these different like people and how they work. And then I've done like explicit modeling and art modeling. So and I've heard the complaints from my friends that are primarily art models that are like, "Oh yeah, like I feel like I'm in competition, especially if when you're at an event, like the shootout for is a really good example. Being at the air raid shootout, there's a lot of photographers that are crotch photographers there that will only book the models that will show their crotch. And the art models were like, I have really great like posing and like structure and skill to offer as well. But they feel like they're being short-ended because they're being put in direct competition with like the models who will do the crotch poses.
Yeah. And you're exactly saying it. Like they really are put in direct competition. Like I've been to some of these events and like, I mean, the way I would explain that happening is, you know, like who, what type of man with what type of needs and interest is going to be signing up for an event like this, right? Like a photographer who wants to get a really unique shot and in a beautiful location that is going to be like fine art. It is possible to get shots like this at these events, but I think you might agree that it is usually not done at these types of events, right?
Right. Yeah, I did get some really cool shots from those events. The location was so cool, but it was such a massive amount of people, and you're kind of shuffle around really quickly because everybody's just booking 1 hour at a time, which it's really hard to like get into a groove with a 1 hour shoot, right? So yeah, at least in that sense, the group events are not always conducive to like creating like high quality art for sure.
But it's really easy to bend over 10 surfaces. Right? Which is what these events are great for. You're just like, look, I'm sweaty, I'm hot, I don't have time to fix my makeup between shoots because this is like a, you know, hour after hour after hour booking. Like I remember I used to go to some of these events with like huge suitcases. Oh my God, like everything. I would just pack so much wardrobe. And I would try to like start the day in something like really cool with like color and texture that would like, you know, work really well with like desert colors and like had this like Western vibe. I always ended up naked for the last like hours of the day. And I'm like, it's convenient. I'm getting a nice tan. Okay. But like, I am just doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And again, because like the target demographic of people to attend this are more likely to be people that would just like to get pretty pictures of pretty ladies. And well, if you're offering, we might as well. Right. And so, yeah, like it's really, it is hard for girls that do more like artistic stuff to compete because, you know, the
Their target audience is a different target audience, and there are photographers that shoot art and glamour, that will also happily shoot with, like, any of these genres of models, but I still understand why, like, especially at events like this or, when you're on tour in a city and another model that's, like, of a similar look to you is on tour in a city, but, like, you have different comfort zones, like, the bookings that you get are going to be affected by like who your target photographers are. So, it all just makes sense.
absolutely.
Anyway, I feel like we could talk about this specific topic for forever. There's a few more like benign archetypes that are on this list that was collected with the help of some of my model friends. And then one of them, the last one that I was just starting to talk about before we got cut off yesterday, is called the collector. A photographer who likes to shoot with, like, all the models that they can, like, the most variety as they're following them online. They're like, "Oh, I wanna shoot with so and so and so and so," kind of like they're collecting baseball cards or, like, Pokemon cards. Like, you gotta catch them all. For these types of photographers, when I've worked with one that I consider to be a collector, I do enjoy it because if they wanna add me to their portfolio because they're collecting, like, range of, like, all the models that they've been following, it means that they were following me and that they're excited to work specifically with me, because they liked my other work or they heard about me somehow. It does make me feel special, like I'm kind of a little, like, mini celebrity in a way, so those are always fun.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. It is, I don't want to kind of not acknowledge somebody's technical capabilities, but it is a bit of a fan experience, right? Where someone's like, I've been following, you and these other people and, blah, blah, blah. I really like your work and it's so great to shoot with you. And
Yeah.
it almost in a way kind of what I would imagine maybe feels like a VIP one-on-one meet and greet, you know? I'm like, okay, like, but my meet and greet, I'm naked.
And some of these photographers who I consider to be collectors, some of them, they have, like, some kind of ongoing theme, and they wanna shoot different models with that same theme, whether it's like, "What can you do with this chair?" Or, like, I wanna put you against this wall with this light," and they put, like, different models in the same scenario. Or they're like, "Oh, what is your specific thing that you are known for? I wanna shoot that thing of you."
Yeah. Or the rose that's been in everyone's mouth.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I totally get it. It's a format for people, and I understand that type of fascination. I like looking for patterns and things, and you know, I've seen photos before where somebody asks like three different people to drink a glass of wine, and every you know 10 minutes to take a photo of them laughing, right? And it's like the progress of somebody's like laughing in four different shots, right? And different people. And it's like awesome to see like the human experience and different reactions to things that are kind of, repeating. So I understand that. I like to look at those kind of shots and look at what the models do on their end creatively and look for maybe like subtle nuances. Like I knew a friend in Dallas, he published, magazines some time ago, and he had a girl, it was called Top Hats and Tails. He had a girls, in top hats with like not those types of tails, but like suit jacket tails,
Oh.
and he's looking posing adorable and like very classy, very, covered boudoir style. And he like had all these 12 girls from the 12 months on one sheet. And it was just really cool. I looked at everyone's different poses. It was interesting to see how like girls cocked their hip to the left or to the right, or who was using a cane and who was like bending a leg and who was flipping their hair, and who interacted with the hat, who interacted with the cane, who like, had their hand on their hip. So I totally understand that type of interest.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines as the collector, or possibly just like a segment that might share the same, like, photographers in a different segment, is the gossipers and social butterflies that know every industry rumor and, like, wants all of the inside tea. So, and there are some photographers like this where you get to the shoot and they're like, "Oh, have you ever met so and so? Well, they did this or they said that," and they want to gossip with you while you're shooting and, like, buddy buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I like to listen in those situations. I am a really chatty person. I'm very open, but I like to be open with people that are obsessed with asking me about myself, where I can just be open and they'll probably forget 90% of what I say, which is optimal. Um, but if I'm in an environment with somebody like that, I'm like, ooh, you are gonna like talk about me. So I'm just gonna give you my best behavior and I'm gonna watch what I say. And I'm not gonna have a faux pas in front of you that you're gonna like perpetuate because you're going to probably do this for your own interest of wanting drama and a conversation instead of really considering,
Yeah.
do I want to be talked about? So I just try to like protect myself in those situations. But like, I'm a curious person. Like, you tell me what's up with what and who is doing whatever with who. Like, I don't really participate in gossip. So like the only way I can stay relevant in any capacity is if people like this, like tell me something. But even then I'm like, cool, but like I don't care.
Right. Yeah.
You
You know
know?
what? That's a really good thing to mention that like gossip like can hurt other people's careers and it potentially could put like somebody in danger potentially. Like if you're exposing information about a photographer that could be viewed as a crime, and you're like letting somebody know in confidence, but they like, you know, go ahead and tell all of their friends, "Oh, so and so said that XYZ person committed a crime at a photo shoot," then, it could get around and it could get back around to you if you're the one that exposed the information. And then you could get like ousted for it.
Yeah, I loosely remember a situation like this happening in the industry a long time ago. I remember going like, oh man, this is a lot. I am not sure I'm going to have 100% both sides of the story to like make an accurate decision.
Yeah. I mean, this is a community and people do, you know, interact with each other. And sometimes there's disagreements or like fucked up shit happening. And
Yeah. I just try to be Switzerland, honestly, in all situations. I'm like, if I see an injustice and I witness it, I'll stand up for it. Like, I'm not going to be passive to like things happening in front of me. So, like, if I see these things in front of me and I can like scope it out and I'm like, okay, like I witnessed this, I know what's going on. Like, mm-mm.
yeah.
But when I see like drama on the horizon and I'm just like not sure who's who and who knows what, I'm Switzerland. I have an opinion. I'm not gonna like tell people, be like, oh yeah, like go enjoy this person. He's like super unsafe. I'll give people warning, but I don't want to perpetuate anything
Right.
ever, you know?
Yeah. I totally understand that. And that kind of concludes the list of the archetype characters that we have gone over. We've gone over photographers who are into this to try and make an income, photographers that do this to be validated, photographers that have like some kind of intimate desires and they're being acted out at the photo shoot, photographers who have lots of creative ideas with their gear that they want to utilize at the photo shoot. We've talked about, photographers who've got magazines that they're working with that they want to publish models in, photographers who just really love people in the industry and they want to be a part of it, collect photos and be your friend and or gossip with you. But let's get into the bonus section of the podcast episode where we can kind of let photographers who want to make money with their photography get some ideas just based on our experience working with photographers who have made money off of their photography or just knowing things about the industry through, all the people that we've worked with over the course of our career.
Sure. I actually had just pulled up the messages I sent you thinking on this topic earlier to kind of guide me on this answer. Let's see. So the question is, how do photographers make money? So two things, right? Like let's just have the first fork in the road. Are they making money on the photos as a product, or are they making money on their services as a human being who knows how to operate a camera on location? So let's just do that first, right?
Okay.
If you're good on location, those jobs exist, right? There's wedding photographers, there's event photographers, there's corporate photographers, all these things exist. The reality check is that AI is changing the market. So people
With
don't,
Jones.
yeah, for headshots, like you don't necessarily need to like bring someone out to the office to take corporate headshots. You just scan in a photo, put them in a suit. And like these pictures are for tiny LinkedIn profiles. Like nobody cares.
Yeah.
For gigs that are more, gender biased, like maybe boudoir, people prefer women because obviously, most women would probably feel safer with a woman.
I have heard the opposite from a few boudoir client type models, though. Not as common, but I have heard a model say that they preferred to hire a male boudoir photographer. And this isn't a person who was an experienced model. They were just a person who hired a photographer for a boudoir session and they were relaying their experience to me. And they said that they felt more natural being sexy in front of a man because they thought that the woman might be, like, more judgy or that it was just
It's kind of more vulnerable. You're like, "Ooh, I'm going to show you my secrets, girl. I'm going to show you my moves."
right. I guess it kinda depends on, like, how far the shoot is going and, like, where the photos are going, like, for her husband or boyfriend or whatever, like, it really depends on the dynamics of who you're working with.
Yeah. I totally get that perspective. I understand that, right? Like, I'm just kind of going in like very big generalizations, but of course, there's like exceptions for everything. Like, everything is fluid. My my partner, he does, weddings and, is open to doing boudoir, but he presents very non-traditionally masculine. So it kind of helps him ease his way around women and, you know, have women be more comfortable with him in these types of shoots. But yeah, like obviously very generalizations. So yeah, like those gigs exist, where you are a camera operator, but like just again, reality check, people are shooting on their phones now. So there's just like there's technical issues, and then you just have like the changing industry and technology and just people's ability to have access to photo services. However, I still fully justify hiring professionals for events, that are memorable because you want your guests to like experience the event and not have to like be taking photos, but
Yeah.
separate thing. So back to our fork in the road, right? So you're like, okay, one is like the events and the other is the content. So once you get to the content, you have to ask yourself, and like this has to be a really real conversation and not what you wish it was, but what it really is. Like, are you shooting porn or are you shooting art? And context is everything, intention is everything, where you plan to show it is everything. Like, this is a touchy subject, but who are you? Because if you're an artist, you can sell erotic stuff. That doesn't matter. You have to know how to be an artist, fundamentally. You need to know how to present yourself. You need to know how to tell a story about your art. You need to be interesting. You need to know how to like make sales to clients. You need to have a platform, be it through galleries or NFTs or something digital, whatever, right? Like, do you know how to sell yourself? And do you know how to be creative? And do you know how to be, hip and pop and whatever artists do, right? If you can't, you are going to end up with a lot of photos in your house, which is fine. You're going to have a beautiful house of your own photos, but like, don't be delusional that somebody is just going to start buying your prints for $10,000. Right. Especially in a world now where it's just so competitive. And like to get discovered, it takes social media literacy typically. And that's not, you know, accessible to everyone and familiar to everyone.
There's a photographer I know, like, in the freelance art model community who he attends a lot of workshops. Sometimes he teaches workshops. He does really good photography and he sells prints. Like, maybe, like, if he goes to an event, he's hoping to get at least 2 or 3 really primo shots that he can sell as a print, and that's like a 4 or 5 day long event, right? That's a lot of shooting to get those few shots that he feels are, like, wall art worthy or storybook. He does sell the rights to some of his images to be, like, on, book covers and things like that.
Oh.
And like, he's not a full-time photographer, he has another career too, but he does make some money off of his prints, off of teaching photography and organizing workshops as well. So that is another avenue of income if you're a photographer and you want to make income off of photography, is hosting some kind of an event that's, revolving around photography and building skills, or like having an opportunity to shoot a certain destination.
Yeah, like that's definitely an option. But again, reality check. Like, if you want to do that, are you a good educator?
Yeah. Right.
Can you teach people? Are you patient? Can you explain a concept to somebody and have them understand it and not just copy your settings? Like, are you able, do you want to organize locations, models, herd the cats, feed everyone, do all these things, do the locations, weather changes? Like, it's completely doable, but you have to be good because if you're a bad event organizer, like people aren't just going to show up.
Yeah.
And, word spreads quickly, especially when you do events with many people, when people are, spending a lot of money to commute there and girls are taking time out of their lives to show up. Like it's, it's, it's risky. It's possible, but you definitely need to have a certain set of skills to do that too. And you have to be realistic about your abilities to be a teacher and an event organizer.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's something that we were talking about on Messenger, like in between yesterday and today, is like if you are selling your services or you are selling your photos or whatever, you really have to define like who you are selling it to and how you can like advertise yourself or promote yourself or position yourself in a way that your target audience or your target customer can find you easily, want to hire you.
And like what you're saying about know your market, this is where I would say my like last angle of photography and, content sales in general to consider demographic of men, right? And what do men consume? Men consume porn. And I think some people would maybe be interested in selling their content as porn, right? Because if it's not art and you're not doing events and it's not for your hobby and you're not willing to keep it private and just shoot this for yourself for whatever reasons, right? That doesn't matter what you do with it. This is, you paid for it, you enjoy it however you want to, print it on your walls, whatever. Like the only other way that I'm aware of, I mean, maybe unless I'm missing some small niches, is to sell sex. It's not what people want to hear because people, I think, would like to be able to make a quick buck and recoup their expenses and live this fantasy of like, oh yeah, like naked, beautiful women come to me and I shoot them and I get paid for it. Oh yeah.
It's over. There's a lot of free porn on the internet and like even the explicit photos and videos that I share on my OnlyFans, like that stuff gets pirated and gets on the internet for free. So like I'm already competing with all this stuff that got leaked of myself, and then I'm constantly trying to, send DMCA takedown requests to remove my stolen content from the internet. Like selling erotica or explicit photos and videos, it sounds like you hear all these stories about how like somebody started an OnlyFans and now they're making $100,000 a month. Like that is not realistic unless you have like a million followers and you're really good at marketing.
Well, and like let's come right into where you're saying that, right? Unbelievable marketing.
Yeah.
Marketing is creating an amazing story for a product and having people become interested in it and relating this product to themselves and thus wanting to consume it. You are a brand. You are a beautiful woman. You are an art model. You're an adventurer, right? You are, how else would you describe yourself?
Yeah, like
A blogger, podcaster?
yeah, podcaster, RVer, location guide,
Yeah, you're very multifaceted. And you are the brand. You are the story. Like people come to you because they're curious about you and they want to see your crotch because they're curious about you, right? Why not? If a photographer wants to sell their porn, they don't have the story. They're just a person with content. And I think in a different time in history, these stories didn't matter so much. It was like, oh, well, she's naked in Playboy. all the girls in Playboy are a little naughty. Ooh, they're right here at my fingertips in my bathroom. And you needed men to gatekeep that industry because they had the cameras and they had the studios and they owned these, media companies, right?
Before the internet, right? Like,
Before the internet, right? And so I think a substantial portion of, our client base are people that grew up around that and they remember that. And it's just like, but whatever happened to it? It's gone. It's gone. Like the women have claimed this industry.
yeah.
And that's why we can have an OnlyFans and it is possible, but not recommended to try to sell like, oh, I have, 20 different models I've shot. I'm just going to upload photos of them. How are you competing with Google when you do that?
Yeah.
You're just posting more naked photos of more women. What, what Christy offers is the fact that people look at her to be, what is Christy doing today? Oh my gosh, what is Christy's house like? Oh wow, that's her lingerie. That's her, I can relate to her. She's online, she's talking to me, she's traveling right now. Oh, what a beautiful location. I'm gonna want to go and photograph there too, right? Whatever. But like you inspire people and people want to interact with you and people want to be close to you and whatever digital, connection they can have with you. Like is that or what you're selling.
Look at my ass right now.
But that's the beauty of it, right? Like that is your career, that's your profession. Like you are a digital persona that like offers people companionship as well as creative inspiration and conversation and entertainment, right?
Yeah. But with all that being said, even though I provide the experience of you get to access communicating with me and like, all my nudes and the stuff that I can't post on Instagram, for the people listening, I have 154,000 followers on Instagram. Guess how many OnlyFans subscribers I have? Just take a wild guess.
I have no clue, honestly. Oh man.
83.
Is that a good number for you?
It's back when OnlyFans was more popular, it was a lot higher. But like, I'm just saying the percentage wise, like you would think that having hundreds of
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
would be at least 1,000 followers. That would be like a very small percentage still of the people that follow. People assume that having a large following means that that's automatically going to translate to lots of money. But
No, not at all. And I think something to really consider here too is like the word follower, right, implies momentum. You're like consistently pursuing someone and you're consistently interested in someone.
yeah,
So as soon as you stop and you don't make a post for some amount of time, these people go, right? Like you can have followers on Instagram. You're not really inclined or motivated to unfollow someone on Instagram, right? Why? Like, why would you do that? You're not paid for it.
I'm sure that at least half of my following is completely dead, bots, or like don't even log into their accounts anymore. It's a really old account.
Exactly, right? So it's like these numbers, I mean, they're real, they happened, but there are so many factors at stake, in these social media numbers because you're right, like bot farms exist, all these things are, contributing factors to these numbers, these statistics. But on an OnlyFans, if you're not uploading and you take a breather, people just disappear because they're just going to subscribe to someone else. So it might seem like you're like, oh wow, this girl has like a huge following. If you don't keep it up, people go, understandably. So it is like it's a commitment.
Yeah.
And it
Not,
takes
not, not just having the followers on social media, but engaging with the followers in a way that makes them want to click over to the link in your bio. And that's still something that I struggle to do because I don't like having to do that. And that's probably why I have that like low percentage of what's the word conversion from my social media following to my pay sites where people could actually support me. But the reason I brought up the statistic for myself is just to kind of show how, like, if you are a photographer that wants to sell like explicit imagery and drive people to the link in your bio, like on your vent box or on your website or OnlyFans or Patreon or whatever, or clips for sale, like getting the followers is one thing, but you have to interact with them in a way that makes them want to click on that link.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. So like I'll kind of sit around and I'll just scroll, accounts to kind of get inspiration and understand, what's effective in the market. And I see some girls, they create content where they're just shaking it around. I mean, if they have whole agencies behind them just blasting their accounts, over every, corner of the internet, eventually they can just cast a net that's so big people are going to find them, right?
Yeah.
And their subscription can be so low that they can just put out such cookie cutter content and it's just not going to matter. But
Yeah.
unless you have like that whole thing going for you, you do have to be really creative in your content. And like I've been looking for inspiration recently because I've kind of wanted to restart my OnlyFans and like really have it transfer. I like have my personality transfer into it and have it be like personable and something that's like really my like Vika Ruslanova, brand. And because I've kind of been spread all over the internet for so long under, different stagings and stuff and being different characters and all the fetishy, fantasy things that I've done. I love it, but I want to like really make a statement with like my own.
You have this authenticity about you that is intoxicating, that I think that even if you're not going to be sharing something explicit or pornographic or whatever, I think that people would sign up just to support you because they feel that they love you even if they've never met you in person, because you're so transparent and enthusiastic and you speak eloquently and you're very interesting to listen to, and you have this really taboo lifestyle that people are probably curious as fuck about, and I'm sure that people would sign up for your OnlyFans even if you weren't naked on there and you're just telling stories.
I am confident in that. My problem is I am so inconsistent. I hate it. It's just the worst. It is just my crippling flaw. I can have like a shoot day. And if I can get into the groove of like scheduling my uploads and then eventually like hiring somebody to kind of support the flow of content,
Yeah.
I'm going to be set.
Oh my
That
god.
I'm just
Tell me.
constantly on some ADHD side quest project saving the world somewhere. And I'm like, okay, girl, like tomorrow we're really starting. And I
This is
have,
a hurdle, for like creative minded people in general. Like, we don't want to be put into a framework where we have to be organized.
yeah, because the creativity just like flows out. And I'm like, well, it's done flowing. Now I have to like do something with it. I separated my personal content recently from my, stuff I'm willing to like monetize. I think I have 25,000 like photos slash videos
Holy
on
shit.
my phone. That's not even my like server back home. And like I haven't like posted a lot of it was just insane. It's absolutely mind boggling insane. So my head is like spinning now from all this like December stuff. I'm like looking at my computer in front of me going, oh, when we're done with this podcast, this is actually exactly what I have to go work on. Oh my God.
We can wrap it up soon. I think we have suggested a lot of good ideas on how photographers can make money. We've talked about, selling their services as a photographer, be that for events, or I don't think we specifically mentioned it, but like, family portraits, high school photos, like those are all services that people want and need on a regular basis. One thing that I have found that I hear a lot from so many photographers that are kind of outside of the professional model like community is there's a question mark of why would a photographer ever pay a model, because photographers should be getting paid if they are shooting somebody. And then there's that whole diagram that people pass around where, what level of experience you have, like denotes like who pays you or who you pay or whatever. I'm sure you've seen that little graphic out there.
I would say I wouldn't get so focused on level of experience because that's kind of a nebulous thing to measure. I would say just fundamentally, who needs it?
Right. Like, are you looking to photograph like, if you are needing photography services for your portfolio as a model, you could hire a photographer. But being a photographer that would make a full-time income to support yourself off of photographing models, like, it is such a niche world. And there's a lot of photographers that hire models or shoot with them for free and stereotypically, a lot of people who fall into the want to be a model category are people who are younger who don't have a lot of disposable income to hire somebody.
I mean, yeah, and they don't really need the income though. It's so accessible, and phones are getting better, and I'm not saying it's comparable to what you can take on a DSLR, but I can look fucking hot on my phone in the privacy of my own room with a timer and a tripod. If I'm looking for something specific, and this kind of goes back to the idea of like branding, right? Like if my OnlyFans or however I want to portray myself is my story, right? It's my brand. And my intention is to connect with the audience, to be, alluring, enticing, to like foster connection, whatever. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I was like, I need to make sure that my filming style is personal. Like when I look at some girls that I kind of use as like idea references, they almost like talk to the phone as if it's like their boyfriend, or it's almost like as if they're sending a message to a boyfriend and he's going to read it. It's like very intentional. So to shoot that type of content, especially for what I'm guaranteed to make money on, which is the specific direction of sales through OnlyFans, I don't particularly need the perspective of someone else taking a photo of me in a professional setting. Like I might look pretty. It might, I could get lit in a way that I wouldn't be able to do at home or, do something more stylized, of course. But I don't need to sell a stylized artistic version of me to these people. These people want to see a more vulnerable side of me. Like, my brand is more natural, like I don't do a ton of makeup. I'm a little feral, a little gross, a little like,
Yeah, the niche for shooting OnlyFans type content or like, personal type content for your fans, that has definitely been like overtaken by the iPhone or the Samsung, right? But
Google Pixel.
like markets of people who might be like interested in hiring a photographer. I took an online class for marketing, I was actually trying to learn how to sell prints of my artistic nudes to like a mass audience. And there was a webinar that I attended where they described, okay, what kind of art do you create? What audience is the likely audience to buy it? And does that audience typically have, income that would support them purchasing your product or service? So, like, for example, if you take photos of like golf balls, like on a golf course, you could easily market that to people who really like golf, who are often people who have lots of money, right? Because it costs like balls, I guess. Yeah, and that's just like a really random generalization. But the audience for people who want to buy landscapes to put within reach. It's a huge audience, and those Ansel Adams, like cajillions of people have bought his landscapes because he's a known like photographer, and people are like, "Oh, I want to buy a landscape for my living room. What should I get?" Ansel Adams. That obviously that makes sense. So, like, does your target audience typically have the funds for that? So, if you're trying to like make money as a photographer full time, you have to think about who are your target clients, and do you have enough target clients in your industry or in your reach that will likely be willing to pay for your products or services on a frequent enough basis to like support your income?
yeah, I mean, you just have to ask yourself, right? Like, what's your path of sale?
Yeah.
You have to like really think it out, and it's really competitive now on the internet, and it's so much more about the story building and content
Yeah.
that fosters engagement. and you kind of have to engage with the phone. So it comes off like you're engaging with the viewer, and you don't necessarily need someone else to do that.
And you don't necessarily have to create like video reels, but I will throw out there's a few boudoir or like headshot photographers that have started making like funny comedy skits, kinda like the funny photographer skits that I also have made. Every time I see one, I'm like, "Yes, this is great marketing." Kind of like I don't know if you've seen any of these skits where a hairdresser has a TikTok channel and she makes funny videos about, like, awkward interactions that she had with, like, her hair clients. Like, I see some smaller photographers making silly videos like that, and it just makes me think that they're funny and relatable, and then you wanna work with them, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people really enjoy satire, and, humor is an amazing selling point. Like, going back to like people that inspire me, like, honestly, kind of seeing what you were doing with your clips was really interesting to me because I was like, ooh, like you've broached comedy. That is really neat. Like, it's not necessarily something you get to do as an art, glamour, erotic model, maybe fetish model. You get to do comedy. But with your clips, I was like, this was a really nice, like, creative outlet for you and a really good angle and gives you dimension and approachability because if you can laugh at it, you understand it. And if you understand it, that means you're safe. And you're safe, you're disarming. And if you're disarming, you're inviting to people. And if you're inviting people, people want to work with you. So,
I like how you just broke that down.
oh, well, thanks. You know, So I think that that really is like a good avenue to take with, content that draws attention. But then again, like that's hard. Like comedy is not easy. And to create this content that is, attention drawing and can keep somebody, curious to watch it, it's hard. I feel like this industry just keeps adding like qualifications necessary, right? It's like, well, you don't just need to show up on shoot on time. Now you have to bring your wardrobe. Now you have to do your own social media marketing. Now you have to have a backup account in case you get, flagged. Now you have to have your own, campaign. Now you have to do this. Now you have to learn how to edit videos. Now you have to learn how to edit vertical videos. Now you have to know how to do this weird TikTok dance. Now anyone. It's like, oh my God, I just want to like be a hot girl on
Yeah,
why do I have to learn all these things?
I know. Tell me about it. Well, I think that's probably all of the information that I can possibly give about how to make money in photography. Obviously, like we're not creating like, 10 lesson course on this. We're just presenting ideas because after talking about all the different types of photographers, you know, some of them want to earn money off of their photography. They've purchased all this nice gear so that they could shoot with models, but they also want to come up with ways that they could profit off of their photography. And, if you're working with models as a creative outlet, that might like result in some sales, but it is kind of hard to make money in this niche, you know?
Yeah.
I am now the first person who had said that.
Yeah. And I think just people need to hear it. And if they choose to pursue it, good on them. I wish them luck. I enjoy, strong willed entrepreneurial spirits, but just know what you're getting yourself into.
And there's a lot of photographers that I know that got into photography through like finding a meetup group and going to a workshop where they shot models. And then they, went from the workshop to shooting like one on one with models and they've upgraded their gear and they're like really invested in it because they're passionately driven by their own creativity and inspiration that they see of other photographers' work. But then they get to a point where they're like, all right, I've gone so far in this world. Like, what can I do more with my photography? And that's part of the reason why I wanted to, have that little section of this episode be about money making.
And I think a good mindset to have is to remember to stay humble and keep things simple. And remember to have hobbies for the sake of hobbies and not to just let the creep of capitalism encroach everything that we do. It's okay to just do your art because you love it and save your income for a luxury hobby to hire professionals that are safe and dependable, that are good collaborators, and to hire them for the genres that they are advertising clearly. And do it for you and make a print of it, put it in your house, but just enjoy it.
You summarized basically like that whole last half an hour, like so eloquently with that statement. And I think that's a great place to end on. And honestly, the ending of the original recording sort of got cut off somehow. I don't know. The app must have cut us off. But anyway, that was pretty much the end of the episode. Thank you for listening. And I know it was a little bit discombobulated, the money making ideas that we came up with. It wasn't like cut and dry, like bullet point lists, but we did kind of talk about all of our thoughts and input and like personal experiences when it comes to making money off of imagery and what we've seen other photographers do and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and just our conversations that we have with photographers that we shoot with, where sometimes photographers are expressing to us, oh, I wish I could just make money off of this photography. And that's really why I wanted to tag that whole section onto the end of this episode. Honestly, it probably could have been an episode of its own, but I'm really glad that I did that like segment with Nadia in particular, because Vika, Nadia goes by both names, Nadia and Vika. She has just such an interesting way about being so open about talking about the sex sells aspect of model photography and how it kind of blurs the lines with like pornography and sex work, like whether or not you want to admit it, it blurs the line. Like, you know, if you're like the government and you're looking at nude photography, like a lot of people are going to call it porn, even if it is completely artistic. Like, let's be real, okay? Like, modeling and sex work do blur lines. And I'm glad that Nadia, Vika, and I talked about that together, because you don't always hear it that bluntly. And Vika was just so blunt, but so eloquent at the same time. I hope that none of our bluntness was offensive to anybody listening, but, you know, please take our musings with a grain of salt. Like, nothing is intended to be hurting anybody's feelings in this episode. We truly are just having a good time chit-chatting it up. I'm looking forward to hearing anybody's feedback about the episode. I got a lot of good and interesting feedback from part 1, and I felt like part 2 that you just listened to was a lot more salacious than part 1, especially some of Vika's elaborate visual interpretations of erotic modeling. So, fun, naughty stuff. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and I hope that if you enjoyed this episode, you go ahead and subscribe and maybe share it with your friends. All right. Looking forward to coming up with a new episode soon. Bye-bye, y'all.